Hey everybody, it's PartyElite, and a couple weeks ago I had the chance to check out Steam Next Fest, keeping an eye out for any particularly interesting games that I thought you might be interested in. After scouring through many pages and playing many hours of many demos, I've got for you here a selection of games that I think are definitely worth keeping an eye on. As always, you'll be seeing a focus around strategy, tactics, sim, management, that kind of thing. The usual for the channel. I just want to mention that if you see a game you're really interested in, putting it on your wish list really helps the devs out, so keep that in mind as we begin. Now, there's lots to talk about, so without any more time to waste, let's take a look at the best from Next Fest. You might recall Carrier Command 2 being mentioned in my most anticipated games video from the start of the year, so I was really excited to see it available to play in demo form during this week. Putting you in charge of an aircraft carrier with access to other types of units on board as well, Carrier Command 2 has you running around a command deck, flipping switches, toggling toggles, and pressing buttons in order to execute commands, all while you actually take control at the helm and pore over maps to consider your angles of attack, which units to deploy, where and when. With its retro vibes and the way it embraces the analog and digital aspects of it, there was something very satisfying about scooting over to my sights to mark a few targets before heading over to a different monitor where I could toggle my weapon loadouts on my units before then activating them and subsequently telling them where to go through a different monitor entirely. This is a very interesting simulation of being in charge of a vessel like this, and though the demo itself didn't get too chaotic, I can see how the gameplay can escalate into a panic frenzy as you run from screen to screen, trying to keep all systems operational while actively battling an enemy carrier, especially in multiplayer. I was curious about this game already because it has the Microprose name on it, and having sat down with it, my curiosity has peaked into full-fledged interest. Another one from Microprose, Regiments is set during a Cold War turned hot, with battles between NATO forces and the Warsaw Pact taking over the German landscape, rendered in a beautiful aesthetic here. Comparing this game to Steel Division is a great way to get across what to expect at the core of the game, if you're familiar with the title from Eugen. If you're not, fear not, I've got details in literally just a second. The game is planned to be focused around the single-player experience, with a skirmish mode as well as a dynamic campaign. 3 game modes, 4 factions of the Soviet Union, USA, West and East Germany, and over 60 authentic vehicles to command as well. You command your regiment in battle against the enemy, calling in reinforcements using points generated over time, relying on access to additional task forces to bring in additional units as the battle goes on. You'll find yourself managing the supply of ammunition to your forces as battles go on as well, relying on the movement of supply trucks to do so, and as you push through the countryside and through towns and villages, you'll be leading all manner of troops: tanks, infantry, air force, artillery, recon, and even command. Different units have different strengths and weaknesses, with different amounts of armor or different ranges on their weapons as well, and seeing these units engage from any camera distance is an absolute sight to behold. Situational awareness, tactical maneuvering, breaking enemy morale, and maintaining your own are all part and parcel of a game like this, and as a fan of the War Game and Steel Division series, I won't complain about more games of a similar type. And while Regiments is at a somewhat smaller scale, not featuring the 10 versus 10 player battles of those War Game and Steel Division games, it does still have some very interesting mechanics and ideas, and it's still beautiful to see in action. It does away with the deck building as well, focusing more about the pre-existing regiments, building and picking pre-existing task forces, and taking multiple approaches at the same mission perhaps, and exploring different ways that you can come out successful, ideally. It hits a lot of the same notes, and it's very well worth keeping an eye on. Wartales stood out immediately to me from the moment I booted into the game. It's Battle Brothers, except in 3D and without the fantasy, at least as far as we've seen so far. You start with a band of mercenaries in an open world, traveling from place to place, engaging with traveling merchants and bandits, acquiring loot, camping out and leveling up your companions down different career paths for various skills, abilities, and specializations. The game is beautiful to look at, whether in exploration mode or in the middle of combat, with that really shallow kind of depth of field that makes everything feel a little otherworldly, almost like they're miniatures running around. It's that tilt-shift effect, which, when executed well, is just breathtaking. And with everything fully rendered in 3D, it's quite pleasant to explore the world just walking around in the real-time exploration mode to see how it's all executed. And the game actually encourages exploration by unlocking skills, blueprints, and more through the course of doing so. So you want to find new towns, you want to find new lands and woods and rivers and all that, not just because you're quest seeking, but also because the active exploration itself is rewarded. Now, the turn-based tactical combat isn't restricted to a grid, though characters do take up, a square's worth of space, so to speak, and there's clear value to tactical thought, flanking, and determining turn order when your turns come around every round. Basically, the turn order flips between your turn and a specific enemy. So when it's your turn, you can choose which of your characters will go, but then you have to wait for your turn again before the next of one of your characters can go, whereas the enemy will have preset initiative, so to speak, determining exactly where each of their units will move instead. Either way, very interesting, and it involves, again, all those typical turn-based tactical elements that you come to expect from this kind of a battle. Now, injuries, when taken, need to be taken care of, because otherwise they'll cause you ongoing trouble, and so every once in a while you'll want to camp out to eat, rest, and heal, or you'll perhaps seek out refuge at a nearby town. You'll interact with innkeepers, smiths, and more from time to time to acquire equipment or sell equipment to gain wealth, and you'll seek out quests to pursue that'll often send you into dangerous parts of the world where you might get ambushed, and if that's not your vibe, then you can be the one doing the ambushing instead, jumping caravans and robbing them for their goods to use or sell, though you'll have to be wary of lawkeepers if you're a lawbreaker. The demo was relatively contained, but a game like this has long legs and could provide countless hours of fun, so I'm very curious to dive in when the full version becomes available, supposedly later this year. Terra Nil is billing itself as a reverse city builder and completely unironically felt like a breath of fresh air. Not only is it absolutely beautiful visually, but its music and core driving force are all equally lovable. You're in charge of reclaiming a wasteland, establishing sources of power and fertility and subsequently growth. You'll redirect water, calcificate soil, and enable yourself to build more of what you need to accomplish this revitalization of the plots of land, going from plot to plot, presumably taking on the puzzle-like challenges of using the right pieces while balancing their costs and the target biome conditions. With each type of piece only working under certain conditions, you'll need to build said conditions from time to time, and it's clear to see where a challenge can come from. I don't think the intent of the game is to send players reeling into angry fits when things don't work, though. It seems more like the game is trying to get you to challenge yourself to do better, providing you with multiple options, multiple ways to solve each puzzle, so to speak, but asking you to maybe compete against yourself more than anything. And that's just the vibe I got from the short demo. You're trying to get the highest score, you're not likely to lose a game, but you're going to come back to a level and try and beat your own high score, or perhaps your friend's high score, or something like that, and it's a bit more tranquil, while still being challenging. And once you've revitalized a region to spec, you'll have to clean up after yourself and leave, and as I hinted at earlier, you'll go from place to place over the course of the full game, presumably, until the whole world has been restored. Again, just a beautiful game. I can't stress enough how it feels seeing a barren wasteland come to life with birds and rainstorms, with the sound playing such an integral part in that feeling of tranquility or perhaps serenity. Or both? Are they the same thing? Anyway, it's a beautiful game, a very interesting concept. It's definitely one to keep an eye on. Paths and Danger, developed by a two-person team, takes inspiration from the likes of Darkest Dungeon with a touch of Battle Brothers in how it blends exploration, quest-seeking, and overall tone with tactical turn-based combat on a grid. The demo gave access to 6 out of 8 characters, each with their own sets of abilities and uses in battle, from the ranged engineer type who can set up a ballista that fires potentially explosive ammunition, to your standard melee character to magic casters and more. From a central hub town where you're able to rest, recuperate, recruit, train, or buy and sell equipment, you'll also be able to seek out quests. With varying difficulties and rewards, you'll take these quests on based on the current makeup and status of your party. Once on a quest, you'll be navigating through various terrain, interacting with points of interest that were unfortunately not available in the demo, and you'll also be engaging in combat. As you can expect of a turn-based tactical combat system, there are points to use for movement and actions. Each skill has a different cost to perform, and each character has a different time to shine. But Paths and Danger also adds morale and stamina into the mix, forcing you to consider the likelihood of your people giving up on the fight, or just being too exhausted to do anything of value. Character traits come into play as well, sometimes in surprising ways, like when the greedy character claims loot for themselves before you're able to pick it up for party uses. The demo gave a good taste of a variety of mechanics, and it teased enough of what's to come to pique my interest. I like these kinds of games, especially when they're particularly unforgiving, so I have my eye on it as it continues development. I love me a good tycoon game, with Pizza Tycoon from 1994 being my earliest exposure to the genre when I was just like 3 or 4 years old, so I have a soft spot for restaurant tycoon games specifically. A Recipe for Disaster, as a result, has been on my list for some time now, so I was glad to be able to play the demo and check it out. As one can expect, Recipe for Disaster has you managing a restaurant and its basic operations, from laying out the walls and tables and decor, to setting up the kitchen and managing staff. Now, staff all have their unique strengths and weaknesses, as well as personalities, which will determine what tasks they're best at tackling. Rather than hiring people with predetermined roles at preset qualities, you hire people with appropriate traits and personalities and affordability, who have an aptitude for certain tasks, in the hopes of making them more and more capable over time. You yourself are a customizable character in the game as well, not just some omniscient being giving orders, but physically working different tasks as well with your own skills and traits. You'll find yourself trying to keep up with inventory and inventing new recipes to fulfill various types of patrons' desires and demands, and each neighborhood will have different expectations of restaurants in the area. All information you'll see reflected in the reviews, letting you know what to work on to improve your standing amongst your competitors. The game releases later this year, and I'm curious to see how all the moving parts come together. From recipe creation to inventory management to human resources and more, it seems like the perfect recipe for success. My experience with Trigon started with a Millennium Falcon reference, with your ship being called the Century Hawk, and then proceeded to more or less be a graphically souped-up version of FTL, Faster Than Light. Those two things combined made this immediately interesting to me, all jokes aside, since FTL Faster Than Light is a game I still go back to from time to time. You're put in charge of a ship in the middle of a war zone, needing to travel from sector to sector while engaging in the occasional conversation and the occasional bit of combat. You need to keep your resources in check, perform upgrades to your ship, and manage power distribution to make sure everything is operating nominally. The crew within your ship need to be ordered around to perform tasks, running from module to buff performance or repair when damaged, and when in combat, you'll be able to see and target the same modules in enemy ships with your various weapons, each of which will have their own strengths and weaknesses. From conversations and moral dilemmas to ship upgrades to traveling between systems and fighting battles, this space roguelike adventure is a, again, souped-up version of FTL, Faster Than Light, and I'm curious to dive deeper into it to see how it sets itself apart. For now, though, I've certainly got my eyes on it, and if you have no clue what FTL Faster Than Light is for some reason, I highly recommend checking that out to understand why I'm so excited about Trigon. City of Gangsters is one I've had my eye on for a while. I love the era, focused around Chicago during Prohibition, and I've always found the topic fascinating. We've had a couple of games tackle the subject, but I don't think any in recent times at least have done it quite like City of Gangsters does. As a turn-based crime syndicate management game, you will find yourself managing movement and action points as you physically drive yourself and your crew around the streets of Chicago, engaging in conversations, business transactions, and combat. You travel from corner to corner to engage with characters and businesses at each corner, and you'll have, again, conversations, you'll build or damage relationships. When doing so, you'll be expanding your network of contacts, you'll be picking up and delivering protection money, or you'll simply be buying and selling goods from out the back of your vehicle. And these interactions are at the heart of City of Gangsters, taking away any feeling of, again, omniscience or omnipotence. Yes, you can look at reports and details of your crew as if you were always carrying a binder with you, but if you want to engage in any meaningful actions, your crew has to physically be present in the area, using up time, represented in the limited number of action and movement points they have to do so per day. Relationship management also takes center stage in this game, as you'll want to have people owe you favors that you can use to meet new potential allies, recruit crew members, or expand your territory. You'll also just want to have good relations to ensure people are willing to work with you. As you can imagine, trust is a real factor in this business, and word of mouth travels far and fast, potentially impacting others' opinions of you before they've even met you. As you grow your territory, you can grow your crew, and this goes hand in hand with having access to more actions per turn across your crew to actually manage everything. Unfortunately for you, as you expand, you'll also find yourself butting heads with corner hooligans who don't really expand just past their starting territory, but there will be a speed bump along the way. You'll also be competing with other crime syndicates. You can use diplomacy, yes, or you can use the turn-based combat system instead, kitting your enforcers out and telling them who to target and with what, while potentially increasing the level of heat at the corner, drawing more eyes from the police. With all its moving parts and an interesting turn-based approach, I had a lot of fun with the game, and I'm looking forward to checking out in full when the time comes. It's got many layers to its gameplay, and the character-centric approach is always something I'm quite fond of, so I definitely have my eyes on it. Anvil Saga is a colony management game where you're in charge of a forge, seemingly somewhere in Central Europe, at least for the demo. Between its story mode, where you're trying to win the love of a merchant's daughter, and its sandbox mode, Anvil Saga looks like it'll be a fun romp through the medieval era with a charming art style, great writing, and fun mechanics overall. Things start, and in fact, stay simple enough in the demo. You mine ore, smelt it, and then forge it into whatever it is the customers want to buy. Customers come in a few different ways, either lining up outside your shop when you're open, waiting for you to accept and fill their order before their patience runs out, or otherwise you might get special orders from, say, a king or nearby lord instead. These orders are larger and will have you ignore individual customers for greater returns, but also at a greater time cost, so you have to make sure you're working efficiently. These larger orders, from the look of it, come to you based on how you've managed your relationship with the local nobility. There are branching paths and decisions to make, and these can all impact your progress. While some are more narrative decisions, others include the basics of operating a business, like how you can opt not to pay taxes to the king in charge, hurting your relations with him. What consequences come of it, I do not yet know, but I'm definitely curious to find out. But yes, the core requirements of running a business do come to play. You need to pay taxes and salaries, you need to maintain customer satisfaction, and you need to look after your employees, ensuring they eat, rest, heal injuries, and train their skills as they level up. Global events like war between England and France will have an impact on who you might be working for and how busy you may be and with what. The demo was a little short, unfortunately, but it has certainly piqued my interest. I'll be keeping my eyes on this game as the developers forge ahead with Anvil Saga. Capital Command has got me all sorts of excited. If you're a fan of shows like The Expanse or are otherwise a fan of hard sci-fi, this is definitely one to keep an eye on. Operating at a smaller scale, you're put in charge of a single capital ship and all of its systems and weapons. Between automatic navigation systems and manual controls, you're able to navigate with full 6 degrees of freedom, taking into consideration momentum, angles, and velocities, not just for moving around, but for engaging enemy targets, something you can also do with the help of automated systems, though you can opt to manually track and fire at targets instead if you're feeling particularly talented. Your weapons are mounted on individual hardpoints on different parts of the ship, each with limitations on their firing angles, each with their own strengths and weaknesses too. You look to line up your shots accordingly, trying to find a way to target not just 1, but 2 or 3 or even 4 targets at a time. Projectiles take time to hit, sudden changes in direction can throw off your targeting, and there's nothing quite as awesome as firing a salvo of missiles in one direction while focusing down another target, while scoping out another target to strike at next, all while seeing reports of disabled systems on enemy ships while repairing damaged subsystems on your own before you get overwhelmed. The game makes you truly feel like you're in command of a massive warship. The austere user interface makes you feel like you're actually at the helm of a ship, and the in-game visuals do a great job of translating that feeling of command to matching visuals. From the sounds of it, the campaign is a bit of a sandbox with wave-based engagements, and an added skirmish mode will provide smaller-scale random battles to play as well. It also seems like the player will be able to upgrade their ship or capture entirely new ones over the course of the game. So the demo was really just a sliver of what all there is to do. Honestly, Capital Command felt like a great bit of escapism. I felt just absolutely awesome in charge of my ship. Even when just training against dummy targets that simply, floated in space, there was a sense of awe that had me immediately hooked. I felt like I was, in charge of this ship, commanding our rotation, our yaw, our pitch, our speed, slowing ourselves down, speeding us up, picking where to fire. It was just, there was so much going on. And again, visually, right, it all comes together very nicely with this, really austere user interface. It felt just absolutely amazing. I can see myself losing hours at a time, just zoning out, taking a break from whatever else is going on in life. I definitely have my eyes on this one, and I cannot wait to dive back in. Next Fest was a great show of what's to come that's worth being excited about, and I hope you find this video helpful in highlighting some that I think stood out most that you might be interested in. Now, do you find any particular gems you'd like to share? Anything here in this video that caught your eye? Let me know in the comments below. I always love to know what people are looking forward to. There's so many games out there right now between AAA and indie that it's, as much as I try, it's always hard to keep up with everything. So I'm sure there are some gems out there that even I missed, and I'd love to hear about them so I can cover them in the future. So again, like I said, let me know down below. Now, if you'd like to stay up to date with strategy gaming, news, reviews, previews, let's plays, and more, don't hesitate to subscribe to the channel, as that's kind of the focus around these parts. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of the channel members and patrons who've been supporting the channel on a monthly basis. Y'all keep us alive and running smoothly. And of course, a big ol' thanks goes out to each and every one of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.